Hey there, Green Lantern Corps, the Comics Kid 2099 here, taking a little break from the DC Animated Universe to talk about another animated series featuring DC Comics superheroes, Green Lantern the Animated Series. If you want to watch this series as I review it, it's on the DC Universe streaming service. No, this is not a paid promotion, I actually don't have the service myself, but I figured if you're interested in my review, you might be interested in the series itself. So go watch the two-part series premiere, Beware My Power, Green Lantern's Light, before you listen to this review. But just in case you haven't watched the episode, here's a spoiler-filled plot synopsis before I get into the review itself. On the edge of outer space, a Green Lantern is killed by a couple of Red Lanterns. Back at Oa, the Guardians, Hal Jordan and Kilowog, find out about this, and with a wink-wink from one of the Guardians, Hal and Kilowog take a prototype spaceship powered by a giant Green Lantern battery to go investigate the death of the Frontier Lanterns. After an altercation with the Red Lanterns, the Reddies destroy a planet, with another Green Lantern dying. Also, quick pause, is it weird to anyone else that Kurtwood Smith has been involved in 3 Green Lantern things, but as a different character each time? No? Just me? Okay. But one of the Red Lanterns, Razor, feels remorse for his part in the destruction of the planet and wants to die. But instead, Hal Jordan takes him prisoner. Cue credits. So I should say that I've never really been a huge Green Lantern fan, and I'm even less of a Hal Jordan fan. But despite that, I love this series. So before I get all critical on these episodes, I should say that if you also don't like the Green Lantern concept or Hal Jordan specifically, you should at least give this episode a chance. Or if you're especially bold, go buy the DVDs like I did. And speaking of things I don't really care for, I've never really liked that every color known to man has its own corps of lanterns. I've always thought that got out of hand, and there should just be the Green Lanterns and maybe a corps of evil or at least morally gray lanterns, but not one corps for each color. But I also recognize that if you're going to do an ongoing series, you need to have supporting characters, which I'll get to in a minute, and villains for the heroes to fight. And before Geoff Johns came onto the Green Lantern book a little over 10 years ago, this series just did not have that many memorable villains. Their best one was dead at the time, and Johns had to amp up some of the existing ones like Black Hand, and create entirely new ones like the Red Lanterns to inject some life into the Green Lantern series. So while I still don't just love the idea of there being so many different corps of lanterns, I understand the why of it for this series, as I cannot think of who else they could get to fill an entire season or half season as the case is here. And like I said, you also need supporting characters so that stuff can actually happen when stuff isn't happening. Like when Kilowog and Hal aren't blowing up a drone that's following them, they can talk to Kurtwood Smith and his wife and make small talk. Without supporting characters, your series becomes very boring. And this series took the very interesting route and created a couple of brand new characters who were not native to the comics. We have Aya, the artificial intelligence that comes with the ship, but she doesn't get that much to do just yet. And then we have Razor, who is really more of a protagonist than Hal or Kilowog. Sure, we spend much more time with the Green Lanterns, but Razor is the one with the character arc. He starts off hating the Green Lanterns, willing to kill to satisfy his rage, and by the end of this two-parter, willing to die for what he's done. If I had any complaints at all about this series and about this episode, it would be that Hal and Kilowog are very static characters, and don't go through much of a character arc at all during this series. Hal is a cowboy with a heart of gold, he bucks authority but for good reason, and he'll charm the panties right off any lady who consents. Kilowog is gruff but cuddly, and while he may growl at you, you don't want anyone else in your corner during a fight. This describes both of them at the beginning of the series and at the end. Sure, their relationship to Razor changes as the series progresses, but their character remains static throughout. So since Kilowog and Hal aren't our protagonists, let's talk a little bit about Razor. This series has a fine line to walk, because Razor is responsible for the death of at least 2 Green Lanterns, probably more. He technically didn't pull the trigger on the guy at the beginning of the episode, but he stood by and watched, which is as good as doing the deed, if you ask me. But this guy is also our dark brooding Heathcliff type that we want people to sympathize with and eventually root for, so he can't be too evil like Atrocitus and the big beach ball head guy. But this series doesn't pull any punches on having Razor do some bad stuff before he is taken prisoner by Hal. But despite that, his hesitation when he does do something bad and later his remorse, they feel genuine, which could not have been easy with how little screen time we get with him in the series premiere. And speaking of the other Red Lanterns, we don't get a whole lot about them just yet, but the tease we do get is satisfying enough to make me want to come back. Atrocitus blames the Guardians for the destruction of his planet as well as the planet of the big beach ball head guy. Now, on the one hand, the Guardians have always rubbed me the wrong way. In a way, they're kind of like Professor Xavier of the X-Men. They mean well, but they've always got some shady skeletons in their closet. So even though Atrocitus is basically Satan, I do believe him, sort of. But big beach ball head guy, isn't he the same species as another big beach ball head guy who is a Green Lantern? If his planet is destroyed, which I think Atrocitus said it was, wouldn't green big beach ball head guy have something to say about that? Or maybe he knows it's destroyed but doesn't know if the Guardians are responsible? I've actually seen this series before, but I don't really remember all of the specifics on the motivations of the Red Lanterns, so this one, I'll just enjoy the ride like all of you folks watching for the first time. There are a few very tiny nitpicks that I do have with this episode, like the sudden appearance of a prototype spaceship that will become our main setting throughout most of the series. It's weird that the Guardians have this when all of them except for one of them seem to think that the Frontier Lanterns dying is no big deal and does not warrant investigation. Also, that this thing can take them to the Frontier in minutes when their ring would take 18 months is really really weird, and I feel is mostly there so that we can strand these guys far, far away from the safety of Oa and a few thousand other lanterns, even if it doesn't make much sense at all. I mean, the ship is powered by a lantern battery, and lanterns operate on willpower, right? So why does it take the ship minutes and a lantern with a ring months? Oh well. This leads to the character of Aya, who I adore, so it's not a deal breaker. So that's about it for this episode, guys. I hope you'll follow me along for the ride, and if the DC Universe streaming service takes the series down before I finish reviewing it, well, that's just incentive for you to go buy a physical copy of the series, right? So anyway, I'll be back next weekend with a review of the next episode, and I'll have a couple more videos up during the week. Until then, see you later.